So just going to kick off with leadership, which the title, one of the subjects that we said we're talking about is empowering you to lead your business through this level of uncertainty. So to me, there's two issues here. One is the uncertainty. And then the second thing, which is new to most business owners, is everything you're doing now is virtual. You're actually having to run your business, run your teams, talk to your contacts, talk to your advisors, talk to your bank virtually. And that in itself is super challenging. So just looking at uncertainty first, and again, this is all to help you guys get in the right position to approach your bank, approach a lender, approach other people that might be able to help finance your business. So these are the things that we just want to share with you and get you thinking in the right place. So firstly, uncertainty. You have to be able to communicate to everyone, and there's no such thing as over communicating when there's times like this. You need to be communicating to your staff, to your clients, to your suppliers, to your advisors, to your bank, everyone that you've got in your circle, you need to be communicating to. And it's important that you have some kind of plan around how you keep that communication going, keep it up to date, and make sure it's relevant. Secondly, as a leader, you need to be positive. I know some people here might not be leaders of their business, but you might be managing people, and it's really important. If you're managing anyone, your business or anyone else, we've just got a few more people joining there, so welcome. So yeah, be positive. There's no point in your head in the sand thinking this is all a disaster. I have to say, for some businesses, this is a bit of a disaster. But if you can, and the reason most of you are on this call is you've still got something you want to push along with and take your business to that next stage. So be positive, you have to be. And no bank is going to be lending to you if you're going to them saying this is a complete disaster scenario. You have to be positive mindset and be thinking, how are you going to navigate your way out of this? I've also put on here, build a strong mindset. I think it's really important as leaders of your business that you have a strong mindset around going about this. And number one, you have to look after yourself. You often hear the expression around you on an aeroplane, look after yourself first, put your own mask on first. This applies here as well. You have to look after yourself. So just a few things that I've seen companies doing and I'm applying to myself. Daily rituals. You cannot, if you're working from home, just work fully. You need to break up your day, spend time with your family, maybe spend time with your kids that you wouldn't normally have. Go and do things other than just work. Clear your mind, get some fresh air, do some exercise, have some downtime. As some of us are more busy than others, and we have days when we're more busy than other days. This is a great time to be learning and growing your own knowledge, your own mindset. So anything that you're not particularly hot on, whether that's marketing, whether it's how to use tech, learn. There's so much content out there to go and look at and learn, and you can encourage your team to do this as well. Learning and growing your own knowledge is really important as we go through this. This is an opportunity. I think everyone should be thinking about this as an opportunity, not just a crisis. Every crisis has opportunities, and you need to be looking outwardly to try and approach these. And then just celebrate those small wins. There will be wins that you'll have day to day. Maybe, we're 2 and a bit weeks into this. Maybe the fact that all your IT is working and you can communicate with your team, that is a success. So celebrate those things, celebrate it with your team. Look at the wins that you've made, the small wins, and be positive about them. I've also advised people that there's lots of news out there. Some of it can be very, very damaging to motivation. Just limit what you look at. I've had a couple of businesses, especially in the first week, all they did was look at the news. You've got to look at what's in front of you, what's in your control, and start impacting it. And you've got to lead your business through this. So that's one thing on uncertainty. Moving on to virtual leader. So what's really important here is a couple of things. Leadership doesn't change. The fact that you're not in the same location you're used to being, the fact you're not interacting physically with your team, you still have to be a leader and focus on the things that are important. These are a couple of things I believe every leader is probably thinking, whether they're actually in the same office as their people or now virtually. So how do you know your people are really working? Are your people getting enough interaction? By this I mean both work interaction and stimulation from other work colleagues, working together and collaborating, but also social. Are your staff getting enough social interaction that they would normally get during their working day? These are the kind of things you need to be thinking as a leader. Are your team getting this? Are the people in your business getting all these things? Because this is all going to be important to making sure your business still functions and you've got a great team supporting you as you go through this. are you getting, or collectively as a management team, are you getting good feedback to help make decisions? As you go through this, as you start having conversations with banks and lenders, you are going to have to make decisions. You're going to have to look at various options. You cannot do that without having knowledge and feedback from across the business. So you need to think about how you're going to do that. Can we be, or can you be an effective leader now? An effective leader now, the same as you would be if you were working together. You have to be thinking, actually, you need to be. There's no way around it. You have to be an effective leader now. The fact you're virtual, the fact things have changed, you have to address that. So being a virtual leader is different. You have to accept that it's different and it needs to be different. The methods of communication to be successful have changed and they need to change, and you keep on needing to think as you lead your business through this, and as we go into potentially more months of this, you need to continuously think, how do you improve what you're doing? How are you improving the methods of communication between yourself, your team, and everyone else? The reason I'm saying all this is everything here is going to lead into how you actually have a clear plan and make sure your business has a success. The chance of success of surviving through this is improved, but also the bank is going to look into what you're doing and support you. And it might not be just a bank, it could be anyone that's going to put money into the business. The notion of being a lonely leader, a lot of leaders running their businesses feel lonely. The fact you're now virtual as well means this isn't just an emotional thing. It's not as if you're just sat in your office feeling the one at the top making all these decisions. You're doing it in your own space as well. So you've got to accept that things are different, but how can you actually improve those things? And I just want to highlight a few things that in some cases you might think are obvious, but it's important to really recognize these. So firstly, the interpersonal dynamics are different. You cannot have the same interaction with people in this virtual environment. Any leader has to be seen. If you're going to lead your business, motivate your team, and show good decision and good direction, you have to be visible. You can't obviously do that as easily when you're virtual, when you're not walking around the office. So you've got to create that opportunity that you are seen across the business and people are listening to you. So this is all about communication, using the various tools, whether it's email, video, phone, all the things that you need, you can go and use. Your message needs to be clear in your messaging. So I've seen a lot of business owners and founders struggle with communication. When you're communicating virtually, your messaging needs to be even clearer than it ever has been before, especially what you send out to clients, and again, what you're going to send out potentially to people that are going to help fund your business. You need to have clear messaging, and it's more important now than ever that you're thinking, okay, what am I saying? How is it going to come across, and how are my team going to react to that? Because you're going to be using your teams of people to help you through this. You need to be focusing on that messaging as well. New ways of getting and giving feedback. You clearly cannot have the same level of feedback virtually as you do if you're face to face. One example of this is, if you have, for example, had a team meeting, after the team meeting, you might just pull someone aside and say, thanks for that contribution. Or look, we could really do with a different attitude there. You cannot do that just after a video call. So think about different ways you can do this. A great example, if you've been on a video call with your team, a team huddle, or any of these things that you're having, if someone's contributed really well, or you've been really pleased with them, you want to give them some encouragement, just a very simple text message, just say, really appreciated your efforts on that. Just something a little bit different, but something that's going to hit someone in terms of what they want to hear, what they want to receive as feedback. So new ways of doing it. Communicate in the best way for others rather than yourself. I think you can easily sit here as a leader thinking you're making your decisions around your business. Communicating that outward isn't always going to be received in the best way. You've got people that potentially have taken pay cuts, people that are concerned, people who've got their own issues, their partner might have been furloughed or lost their job, they might have ill relatives or even more advanced than that. You have to think about how you're communicating and how others might perceive that or take that into account. If we've actually got a tool that we use for this, which is a profiling tool called Perfect Teams. If anyone's interested in how to improve their communication styles, it's something that we do a lot of with businesses, and it's something that we can help with. So that's something we can talk about a bit more in the breakout sessions. And the other thing that's really important is understanding what people are thinking. And this isn't necessarily easy virtually, but this is where you have to have all these conversations going on regularly, so you can actually really understand what people within the business are thinking. So moving on from that, I just want to talk a little bit about technology, because technology at the moment is super important. Technology is a tool, not a barrier at the moment. You have to really understand how you can leverage it to help run your business. Choose the best tools. There's lots and lots of things out there that you can use. You really want to look at the things that are going to be most suitable for your business and the people you've got within it. I've seen, if this is all new to you and you're not sure about how to use this technology, there is actually some quite good, I think, effective resource to use. Think about maybe employing a virtual assistant. A virtual assistant knows how to use all these tools. A small amount of commitment a week to have someone working for you by the hour to help set some of this stuff up, train your team up, is potentially a worthwhile investment if it's not your strong point. Looking for efficiency, so anything using tech that helps things, whether it's communication, anything that you've had on your list to potentially implement as tech, just do it now. No one can object to it now because everyone's having to change. Just get on and do it. There's no point in hanging around. If there's something that's going to improve, just get on and do it. And communication, again, this is just using different mediums. So whether it's video, whether it's video calls, or just sending out video messages, all that. So I just wanted to also just touch on a few things around focus. So again, this is all getting everyone in the right mindset for running their businesses through this, getting themselves ahead of the game with a plan, and looking at how they can then present themselves to get more money into the business. So focus on 3 O's. So the 3 O's I've got here: outcomes, others, and ourselves. So the thing here is, look, outcomes, you've got to lead with a purpose and focus on actually everything you're doing as a leader is getting an outcome that you're after. Looking at others, so you need to be leading your business and others in your business to help achieve those outcomes. There's no point in doing everything yourself. You need the buy-in from your team, and it's getting them engaged with the plan and what you're trying to achieve. And then ourselves. I know a number of you, as you set up businesses or founded businesses, would have done it with a particular purpose in mind. This is one of those times at the moment you need to really leverage that, because that's going to be super important as you show the passion and the purpose for what you're doing. When we're talking about outcomes, the important things here: setting and achieving goals. Organizational outcomes, I think, are important. I also think team outcomes are important, and also personal and individual outcomes. So when I'm talking about this, your organization needs to have a certain outcome as we go through this. That's going to be important when you look to raise money. Your team, what are your team looking to do? How are things going to change in their world as you go through this, as the business model has changed? It's super important that you have some clarity and some thought around the impacts of all of these. And then personal and individual outcomes. This could be simple as learning and developing your own skill set, or it could be financial. If you're sat there as a business owner concerned around the financial situation of the business and the fact that you might be putting more money into the business by raising debt, what you don't want to do is put yourself in a worse personal financial position if you can help it. And it's worth thinking through all the impact of these things that you might be looking at. So when I'm looking at goals, I'm thinking both around the organization, but also how you're going to treat yourselves as founders of your business, as people running the business, but also your team as well. The other thing I've got here about outcomes is trust. You need your team to be on board with this and help. So common purpose, you need to get your team together looking at all these things. You need competence in your team. You need people that can actually deliver what you're asking them to do, and also have the right motives in your business. A lot of you will have worked on, I'm sure, on core values for your business. So if you haven't, that's something we can help with you. But I think a key rule around core values is going, okay, these are our core values, but what does that mean? You could set up with your team certain, what I call teamship rules. So teamship rules around how's your team going to perform together to work through this. And this can all drive off your core values. A lot of people I've seen when companies have core values that sound great, they look great, they've got them on their website, on their internal communications, but what does that mean? And I think the really important thing here is actions. What are those actions that you can go ahead and take that can help your people stick to those core values? I'm going to give you one simple example of this because I quite like it. So John Lewis, in their core values, have got this thing around great customer service. And how as an organization as big as that can you get everyone on board with creating a great customer service? So they've got something called the ABC action. So they've got 3 things. So A, give every customer a warm greeting. Be flexible. If someone asks you to go and show you where the milk is when you're stacking a shelf in a different section, just stop what you're doing and go and help them. And see everyone off with a smile. So for them to give great customer service, they're saying it's an ABC formula, and they're actions that you can take, your team can take every day, every minute of the day, and really get themselves embedded with those core values. So start thinking, what are your core values if you've got them? How can you communicate to your team actions that are going to help them? And again, this is all about delivering performance in the business. I'm sure all of you have seen this, setting goals, setting smart objectives, things that are smart, measurable, achievable, results-orientated, time-bound. This, I'm sure you've read in books. There is no time like now where this is important, because everything you're doing, everything you're going to present to a bank about getting money and how you're going to spend that money needs to be measured. So SMART, I think, is a great thing to remember. Also, I mean, this is going way back, but the whole process of plan, do, check, and act. So this is about looking at what you're doing. Is it working? Check it's working. If it's not working, you need to act and change things. All these things are best business practice, but now is more important than ever that these things are embedded in what you're doing, what you're working on. Feedback. You have to look at feedback from the business to see what's working, what isn't working, and how that's going to best serve the outcomes that you've set for yourself. So looking at and again, one of the examples I've got here is, look, feedback. If you're sat in the office, you can walk around the office, you can gauge the mood of people. What's the vibe of people? Positive, negative, what are they thinking? You cannot do that at the moment. So you've got to look at other ways that you can get that feedback. So existing evidence, what's the tone of people's emails? If you look at notes people have maybe shared, notes on meetings, notes on conversations with clients, get a sense of what they're thinking. What's the tone of the language? Do people seem panicky? Do they seem relaxed? Do they seem worried? Yeah, all these things, you can tell what's going on. It's different, but it's virtual. So you've got to think about these things. Look at people in the business you can really trust. Who are going to trust you with decisions? What other advisors do you need? We're spending a lot of time, my team at Evoke, spending a lot of time advising companies through this. We're their trusted advisors to run things past them. You need to have them in your circle to make sure you get the help you need to make these decisions. Ask open-ended questions. For feedback, you need to let people talk. You want to get people responding to questions, having given it some thought, and with good detail, because that's how you're going to get information. Allow the time for rich and regular conversations. You have to start talking to people and getting people to engage with you to really understand what's going on. And this is really creating what I've called your virtual walk around the office. And again, this stuff's really, really important. Are you being an effective virtual leader? Yes, no, areas for it to improve. So share results. Okay, so 73% areas to improve. So based on that, hopefully some of the stuff that I've gone through there will be useful. In the breakout session, there'll be some opportunities to share some ideas around this. And everyone on this call is going to have an opportunity to have a half an hour one-on-one conversation with one of the team. So these are the kind of things we can help with. The reason I say this is really important, anyone that's going to put money into your business, whether it's government backed or not, needs to show that you guys are on the ball in terms of running your businesses and driving it forward. So that's on virtual leadership. I want to talk about just continuously adapting to change your business model, because again, I think this is super important at the moment. So working on the business, you would have heard a lot of people talking about working on the business versus in the business. I like to use these three colors to distinguish where people work. So green, leadership and direction. So this is your real strategic stuff in the business. Blue is your management and productivity. Red, your support and structure. So the green, that's looking at the vision, the strategy, the culture of the business. This is about long-term equity and building the business asset. This is the future state of the business you're working on. The blue is very much about the now. So it's looking at efficiencies, capacity, operations. How much money have you got coming in today? How are you converting that business? How are you turning it around? Are you making money? So all the stuff you're doing today, keeping your factory floor running, your engine room of the business going. Red is support and structure. So finance, IT, HR, admin. These are all costs, they're overheads that you have in your business. You need to be monitoring them and controlling them. So as you are leaders in your business, how much time are you spending in each of these? So I've just put up a new poll. Hopefully you can see it. Can you see that? The poll?
Yeah, that's up.
Cool. So where are you spending your time? Are you looking at the more strategic stuff, the green, the blue, or the red? One example I would like to share on this is if you're thinking about the green, this is your £1,000 an hour type work. The blue is your £100 an hour type work. Your red is your £10 an hour type work. If you're spending 23% of you, I can see at the moment, spending your time in the red, you need to be delegating because it's not worth your time. Now I've said that, people are changing their answer, so I should stop that poll. So share results. Okay, there's quite a few people changed their answer there. So 13% in the reds. Okay, if that's your £10 an hour kind of work and you're still doing it, you need to think about changing what you're doing, maybe delegate more. If 63% of you in the blue, I would expect you to be spending most of your time in there, which is great. 42% of your time in the 42% of you're spending the majority of your time in the green section. That's great. More of you need to make sure you're spending time in that and focusing on the things that are going to have a big impact on your business. So just going to stop sharing. So changing your business model. These are the things I just wanted to cover very quickly. So there are things here that I think are really important. So firstly, services and products. What things can you be changing in terms of service and products in your business? You know, at the moment, there is very little resistance to change. So you need to really leverage that and make any changes you can because everyone's going to be on board with that. Efficiencies, where can you save money? Where can you save inefficiencies in time wasted, whatever it is, whether it's rework from you know, anything from architects creating drawings, where is there inefficiencies you can get rid of? Costs, any cost that you can get rid of in that red section, just looking at things there. Virtual is the new normal at the moment. You need to embrace it because this isn't necessarily going to go away. Even after we've gone through this whole scenario, the whole virtual model is not necessarily going to go away. So if you haven't got a virtual offering, if you haven't got a product that you can offer virtually or online, you need to start thinking about how you create something. And again, that's something we can talk about. And marketing needs to be shifting. There's different ways people are buying things, and this will change in time as well. I can't see everyone going back to the old ways. You need to think about how people in the future are going to be buying your products, looking for them. Things are going to change. Sales. At the moment, I think when it comes to sales, using compassion is a really important thing to talk about. Having sales with compassion and really understanding what your clients' needs are and how you can help them is really, really important. Customer service. I think at the moment there is a key need to over-deliver to any clients that you do have, any people that you've worked with in the past. Really over-deliver, get out of your way to help them, because that's where your repeat business is going to be important. If it's not now, it will be in the future. These are the things that people are going to remember. I've also got on here, get the most out of your people. If you've got people working at home still, you haven't furloughed people, how are you getting them working the most? How are you getting in the right frame of mind to add, in the right frame of mind to add value to your business? How are you getting them to really add to the bigger picture? Are you getting the most out of them through daily, weekly interactions, etc.? All these things you need to be thinking about. And I've put on here plan for the 90 days and beyond. So I've been saying over the last couple of weeks to companies, you need a 90-day plan. You need to keep on tweaking that. But we're talking now about a much longer time horizon. If you're talking to the banks, they're looking at years ahead. So you need to be thinking about, what does this mean? What are the various scenarios that you're going to work through that are going to mean the bank are going to look favorably on your business and how you're going to get money? These are all the things we can talk about, and we're happy to help with the boat because this is what we do. We're experienced people in putting these plans together and helping companies think through. The other thing is look to invest. There's going to be opportunities. And if you look at some of the things you can do with the funds that are available, you can buy businesses, you can invest in your business, and you can invest in other businesses. There will be businesses that go bust. You could acquire their client base. You could acquire IP from them. There are various things you could be doing. So it's having your head up and looking for these opportunities. And it's a continuous process. The things I've just gone through, it's a checklist of things that you should be thinking about. And I think it's really important that with your team, you're not just catching up on reporting on how things are doing, but you're also catching up on planning as well. You need to be having time aside for planning, which is all in that green strategy and vision bit of the business. So just as a summary, what I've talked about there, just to wrap up, strong leadership is important. Everyone running a business looking for funding needs to show that level of strong leadership. You are a virtual leader. You need to address your habits and think about ways to continuously improve how you lead. You need to spend that time working on the business. You need to be adapting the business model and continuously looking to do it. Then what we're going to talk about after this is funding. So what funding do you need now, and what funding potentially do you need in the future? A lot of businesses that get themselves well set up for the upturn in the economy that will come will find themselves short of cash. So if you're getting cash now, the chances are, if you're successful and thrive through this downturn and start getting more business on the upturn, the one thing you don't want to do is run out of cash at that point, because that would be really bad. So you need to think about these things in terms of modeling out what is your cash flow going to look like on the upturn from this as well. And again, all those things I've talked about before we even start talking about what the banks are looking at and what funding is available from the government. All these things are, one, going to improve the chances of your business surviving this, but also how your bank's going to buy into what you're actually doing with this. So at that point, we're going to have a breakout discussion. So thanks for listening to everything I've said there. So just as a little bit of an intro, this is giving you some just a summary of what the latest is in terms of government funding available by Hugh. So Hugh's one of the team members at Evoke. He's a very experienced financial director, again, working with a number of SME companies on their way through this. And we just wanted to share with you what we know and some of the kind of practical steps you can take about going through this. So what I would suggest you're thinking is, from what I've already spoken about, your approach to leading your business through this, how you're virtually managing your team and planning your way through this. These are the things you need to be thinking about as you think, okay, what funding is there, and also how much funding are you going to need now versus later on. So I'll pass over to Hugh.
Okay, thanks, Rob. Okay, so as Rob said, I just want to take you through navigating access to the different government support initiatives that have been put in place over the last few weeks, and then just add in some entrepreneur and SME guidance as to how best to plan through this period associated with those initiatives. It is not letting me move forward, Rob.
I think it is now. So that was me. Sorry, you should have that now.
Thank you. So the scale of the government package, as I'm sure most of you are aware, it's around 330 billion of guarantees, and that does represent about 15% of GDP, and that's on top of the 30 billion or so of measures announced during the budget. So it is large scale. There's also legal powers in the COVID-19 bill enabling the government to to expand that further if they deem that further support is necessary. So it is opening up the potential for that. And I think we've already really seen in the first couple of weeks that, the initial announcements were over several days, and we've had a further tweak or two to them in, the first couple of weeks or so. And the big question is, that's probably a moving target. So you've got to stay very abreast of the developments and see what happens in the near future. And I think particularly in relation to the CBILS, because that's where there's been the most sticking points to start off with. What's available on the government scheme? First of all, in terms of the general initiatives, obviously it's the job retention scheme, the furlough scheme, where there is up to 80% subsidy, up to $2,500 a month per employee. Now that is going to be available from the end of April, backdated to the 1st of March. Very much, I think, key to survival for most businesses, because many businesses, obviously, the wage bill is a large part of the overall cost stack for them, and it will be via the PAY system. Further support is reclaiming the statutory sick pay relief for the SME initiative there as well, and then there's self-employment income support for non-employee status individuals. Now, with the rates, this obviously does only impact the retail, hospitality, leisure sector, and including nurseries as well. It's 12 months, but limited obviously to only a certain part of the overall business domain so far. You never know; it may yet widen further. And then the last two are really more related to timing: VAT, self-assessment tax payment deferrals, and the HMRC time to pay scheme. So I think welcome initiatives giving a clear cash flow advantage in the relatively short term. Okay, then looking at the grant initiatives, back on. Looking at the grant initiatives, on the small business grant funding, it's 10K for those businesses with a rateable value of less than 15K, and then 25K for those that are in the band above at 15 to 51K. But as I said, only if you're in those sectors. Now, that should be levied in terms of contact by the local authorities themselves, but obviously even the local authorities are probably struggling to get this in action straight away. So if you haven't heard from the local authorities, you should probably be calling them anyway. There is another fund. This is more of an R&D focus in terms of a £20 million fund, and it's for grants of up to 50,000 each per business. Now, this has been pitched at tech and research businesses to develop new ways of develop new ways of working and helping build resilience. And it's basically things like helping distribution of goods, remote education, keeping families digitally connected, and streaming, that sort of thing. And so therefore, in industries such as delivery services, food manufacturing, retail and transport, and supporting people at home. Now, I think this is being launched as part of some form of competition by Innovate UK. It's going to begin in around June. It will last around 6 months, and then the benefits to the public should be hitting in by the end of the year. That's the structure I've heard of so far. Then in terms of the actual loan initiative targeted at the SME sector, it is the CBILS scheme. So they're defining businesses for the purposes of SME in this range at 45 million or less in terms of revenue, and that's then providing the access up to £5 million of loan initiative, and they're splitting that into terms of 6 years for loans and asset finance and 3 years for overdraft and invoice finance. The government is going to be covering the first 12 months of interest and indeed any lender levied fees that are associated with this CBILS loan. And then, of course, as you've heard, they're providing the 80% guarantee. Now, there's about 40 or so lenders that have been identified so far. Obviously, that number may yet widen, but it's all being backed by the government-owned British Business Bank. Now, an important thing to remember, of course, is despite the fact there's an 80% guarantee, businesses do remain responsible for the loan, and I think a lot of the guarantee aspect is obviously to provide lender confidence in the first place to put these loans out to market. Now, there are other initiatives in terms of lending to larger companies. I wasn't going to go into them in detail here, because obviously the focus for today is very much on the SME domain, but just to say that there is the larger scheme for revenues, companies with revenues 45 million to 500 million, which is really very similar to this. It's just the loan size is about 25 million of loan. And then for the very large corporations, there's commercial paper, which the government is also helping to support. Then on the export front, many businesses in the UK obviously do already have an export side to their business. And there are some support initiatives launched for exports. The UK Export Finance has expanded scope of export insurance policy so that UK businesses can secure insurance to cover the major markets. They're also helping to ease the cash flow by guaranteeing bank loans through the Export Working Capital Scheme, and can also support some finance for overseas buyers of companies in the UK in terms of their goods and services through the Direct Lending Facility Scheme. And there's about a 4 billion capacity to support UK firms exporting out to China as well as some of the other major markets. So I think, you know, this represents some oiling of the wheels as well, certainly for those of you that already have an export side to your business. But I think perhaps it's also an opportunity. Different countries are probably going to come back at different pace from the disruption of COVID-19. And there may well be opportunities for those of you that are focused today on a more domestic market to actually consider, is there a way of leveraging your business products or services out to some form of export market as well? And this obviously can then help you do that. Then in terms of other ongoing initiatives, the Bank of England already had a low interest base rate, but it lowered it down to 0.1%, which is obviously probably the lowest it's ever been, with a view to facilitating potential for lower onward lending rates by the commercial banks. Obviously, it remains to be seen exactly how much that will happen, but you'd like to think with this lowest level that we've seen ever, that some of that is going to feed back into those onward rates. Now, the other thing is that last week, many of the major banks announced an election not to pay dividends to their shareholders. So that was a welcome sign. The Bank of England is also urging banks not to pay out bonuses to their senior management. And, we may even find that this goes out wider into the commercial community in terms of some of the corporations that are out there. I noticed today, just before we started this, that the insurance industry, or a lot of the major players in the insurance industry, have just announced that they're not going to pay out dividends either. And I think that's been announced as being worth something like 1.2 billion in terms of dividends that are not going to be paid out after all. But I think the reason why the government, the Bank of England, have certainly been encouraging the banks anyway to perhaps not pursue the dividends or the bonuses is just with a view to maintaining a little bit extra buffer in the bank liquidity system, because obviously very prudent to step against any future pressure on the economy, given that no one at this stage can predict exactly when the disruption is going to finish. Okay. Then wanted to just move on to a few general immediate considerations of your own business organizations and particular considerations in the view of entrepreneur and SME guidance. So first of all, on the employee cost side of things, the job retention furlough scheme, heard on the news today that a study by the BCC, the British Chamber of Commerce, that already there's feedback that obviously a vast number of firms are planning to use it, and they're estimating that will be around 20% of the smaller firms planning to furlough all their staff, and around 50% of companies putting most of their staff on the scheme, and they estimate that will be around a 30 to 40 billion pound cost for the next 3 months, and covering about a third of the private sector or so. So the process of the application is obviously through the PAYE, available end of April to backdate to 1st of March, and a 3-month cover initially, but obviously the government may choose to extend that depending on how long the disruption lasts. And as you know, of course, it's the 80% government wage subsidy to the furloughing. I think in most cases, for many businesses, it is a case of a welcome support and obviously progressing with your applications as soon as you can. But a couple of things just to recognise: formal notification is required, obviously, to the employees that are affected by it. They will retain their employee rights whilst on furlough. And another very important point is that they cannot work for your organisation whilst furloughed. And I suspect that there would very well be penalties if people were flouting that particular restriction. So overall, I think for a lot of businesses, a very welcome move, but obviously careful decision making required in your particular circumstance of your own business as to whether this is something you will definitely take up, or whether you're considering redundancies or a mix of the two. And obviously there are other businesses where clearly you have to retain staff actually working as well through this period. So, a very much case of looking at that in your own particular situation. One other thing to mention is that this is obviously applicable in terms of furloughing for all employees as at the 28th of February of this year. You can rehire individuals that maybe you had terminated prior to this scheme becoming available, but as long as they were obviously an employee at the 28th of February itself. Couple of other things here is just to consider, other ways of doing things in your own business. Maybe negotiate temporary pay cut for employees that you still want to actually physically work in the business during this period. And maybe a solution would be to provide milestone rewards if they do. That could be structured in many different ways. So a time to maybe just reflect, is there another structure you could possibly come up with that might be taken in combination with some of the other initiatives that are out there. And then on the non-loan category, really just to reiterate the ones we talked about at the beginning, I think with the grants, the rate relief and the SME sick pay relief, if your business is eligible, then the near-term credit is obviously very welcome to alleviate the cash flow. Check with the local authority if the grants rate relief hasn't been confirmed. If you think you're one of the qualifying ones, contact them directly, but it should be them contacting you if it's all going smoothly. And then on the VAT and the self-assessment deferrals and the HMRC time to pay, I mean, these really are immediate important cash flow flexibility, probably the most immediate form of short-term relief you can get, quick and essential. So it really is a case of just do it, I think, in most cases. Then in terms of the loan category, I think what we're seeing here really is a combination of government, banks and businesses needing to communicate to solve the solutions together in a situation that's obviously hit us out of nowhere very, very quickly. It's unprecedented. And as a result, of course, especially when you consider you take those three sectors, they're not always used to talking to each other all the time. And so it is going to have some challenges here as it's implemented. The banks are clearly struggling to handle the volume and speed of the CBILS applications. And I think, again, let's just look at this in the backdrop that, if you think of the 2008 financial crash and then some of the processes and criteria that were put in place following that for the banks, obviously they've got a lot of those rules in place. And that's why I think, again, why they're struggling really to adapt to this particular situation that we find ourselves in very, very quickly. That may well explain some of the slow approvals in the initial stage. I think, as Rob touched on earlier, the loan availability certainly requires care in the application. They still have to prove that the business is sound and viable prior to the COVID-19 pandemic, and obviously a clear plan for the use of the funds that you're looking to source here. So need to be very well prepared for that meeting with the bank. And I think, again, as Rob said, need to be positive, stay pragmatic about this, because, to sort of secure that funding, they're going to want to see that you're a leader that's really in charge of the situation right now as you take your business through this very difficult time. In your business financial planning, don't lose sight of the fact that the debt obviously has to be fully repaid at some point, and so don't overburden the business. It's going to be a very careful decision as to what level of funding you may need here. Be sure of the short-term funding requirements, though, for the subsequent upturn. This isn't just about the immediate survival of the business, albeit, of course, that's critical right now, but it is being ready for the upturn when it comes. Also investigate any potential for negotiated debt settlements on existing debt you may have to ease some of the immediate cash flow constraints. But I think in summary, it's definitely a case of what is right for your business, and go away, think about that very carefully in function of the different sources of funding that are out there, and obviously the different constraints that may come with that as well. But planning clearly not just for the short term, but also for the upturn. Ongoing developments so far, government initiatives are clearly continuing to evolve and react to the status. As I mentioned before, the initial announcements were over several days, and we have now seen some tweaks to that also. There have been difficulties in the CBILS approvals and the T's and C's imposed by the banks. I think across the board in the early stages, there were personal guarantees for all of the loans. There were certainly some quotes of some high interest rates as well after the initial interest-free period. And overall, as I understand it, at the end of last week, there were really only about 1,000 or so of loan applications processed with, relatively modest funding overall out of the total pot that is going to be made available. So there has been some pushback by the Bank of England and the government, and so far what's happened is that they've removed the condition of a pre-refusal of a standard commercial loan out of the equation, and the banks have now removed the requirement for a personal guarantee for loans less than 250,000. As I understand it, the Chancellor was also pushing the banks to avoid levying these sort of double-digit kind of interest rates after the initial interest-free period. So obviously we will have to watch that space and see how much the banks do actually respond to the pressure that the Chancellor is putting on them. And then the question is, will there be further changes? I think highly likely, but obviously we can't predict what those changes will be as we speak. But the important thing is, SMEs account for, as I understand it, around about 23 million of the workforce. So it's absolutely critical that the government does continue to support viable businesses to survive through this disruption, come out through the other end following the pandemic. So we've talked a little bit about the scope of the initiatives and some general guidance and considerations. And in summary, I think it really is a case that planning and agility are key throughout this period of disruption. So how to make use of the government-backed initiatives. Navigation around the access is key. Clearly, not all of them are going to be easy. Some of these application processes are challenging, and I think obviously it's the CBILS one that seems to be proving that the most to start off with. But I hope it's clarified some of what is available and given some practical guidance, and then hopefully also some of these things will continue to change. The CBILS applications has proved the sticking point, as I mentioned, but with the ongoing evolution, maybe some of that will be resolved. And I think, when you consider the overall scale of the initiatives announced at the beginning, the 330 billion, from the Chancellor's perspective, a large part of that, I think, was going to be put towards the CBILS. So it's clearly that was their intent, that this is going to be a success. So another reason why perhaps there may be further pressure on the banks if it still proves that it is the sticking point that it seems to have been in the first few weeks. But not only, so I think important to stay abreast because of that change that we've had so far and change to come. So listen to the news, make sure you're checking the government websites because they do update pretty quickly if there are any further changes to the initiatives. But not just obviously about surviving in the short term, already start thinking about how you plan to move your business forward and stay agile in all of your business decision making so that you're really equally prepared for the subsequent upturn, because it's obviously those businesses that are ready for that that are going to be better positioned when it finally comes to secure the benefits from the upturn once the pandemic is easing. So thank you. That's what I had.